Hello and welcome to the Habitat Project podcast, where we talk about cultivating good habits, pursuing our dreams, and enjoying life. I am Anthony, and these are my findings on how to make the most out of each day and enjoy the process along the way. Let's go. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Habitat Project podcast. This is episode 49, and in this episode, I'm going to talk about some mistakes that I made in my practice of Stoic philosophy. I thought I was doing the practice correctly until I learned this thing. So, in this episode, I want to talk about the common mistakes when learning and practicing Stoic philosophy. So there are three, main categories that I felt like maybe misconceptions or or areas where mistakes are easily made. So number one, that would be confusing Stoicism or Stoic philosophy teachings with emotional suppression. Number two is to over-intellectualize or overthink the quotes or the teachings and without actually putting them into practice, into action. And thirdly, thinking that Stoicism is a passive philosophy, is a passive way of life. Because in the teachings, we look to separate what is within our control and what is outside of our control. And I have found, and maybe you have as well, that when we categorize something as outside of our control, it can be easily misunderstood as giving up. Let's get into today's podcast. But before we go into the meat of things, get into the deep dive of these common mistakes. This podcast is brought to you by Habitat Mind Body, a functional fitness training center that combines functional fitness training and mindfulness meditation. If you are in Melbourne, in the Docklands, South Melbourne, or North Melbourne, in that sort of area, come check us out. Come train with us. Follow at Habitat Mind Body on Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube and turn on the notifications so you don't miss out on any episodes and updates, and also sign up to be our founding inhabitant, which at the moment means 30% off all membership, and this can be done at habitatmindbody.com. Let's get into this episode. Number one misconception or mistake when learning about Stoic philosophy is thinking that Stoicism is about emotional suppression. So this is a thing that I thought I was practicing correctly until I learned about understanding emotions, processing emotions, allowing a space for emotions to arise, to observe, to be compassionate about whatever the emotions might be, instead of just suppressing it or thinking that it's a waste of time and trying to get to the solution straight away. So going back a little bit, growing up, I think this is very common, maybe for Asians or Asian guys. But growing up, I wasn't really allowed to show or have emotions. You know, boys aren't supposed to cry. I'm supposed to be grateful for the food that I have and the life that I have. And I really wasn't allowed to. I wasn't able to show any emotions. And when I first started practicing or learning about Stoicism, that is sort of the way that I used it. So a quote that I think kind of shows how the teachings of Stoic philosophy can be taken as emotional suppression is something like, this is a quote that goes, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality," by Seneca. This is something that I think at the time I've taken into meaning, or in practice becoming someone who suppress my emotions because, it's just in imagination and I don't want to suffer, and therefore I'm just not going to think about it, and I'm just not going to feel it. And I think in the day-to-day, when I suppress the little emotions or the little intrusive thoughts and things like that, it doesn't obviously show up. It doesn't necessarily have any immediate impact. But what it does do is make me not really understand how I feel in that moment. And what I noticed was, when I try to go straight to the solution, finding whatever solution that's required, that the emotion's actually still there. So I might be very short-tempered. I might be rushing. I might be making fear-based decisions. And I think when the stakes are low, sometimes, because the stakes are low, I don't think it really matters that much. But because that is the pattern, that is the training, that is the habit, it still happens when the stakes are high. So what I've come to, I guess, realize is, in Stoic philosophy teachings, it isn't about emotional suppression, but verification. So verification, I've come to realize that it's about processing. So it's not saying that the emotions aren't there, the feelings of anxiety, the feelings of fear, sadness, whatever emotions. It's not saying that the emotions aren't there, but it's to verify them, it's to understand them, it's to process them. And by doing that, we allow that energy, that emotion, that signal to be processed, to move on. But if we don't do that, when I don't do that, that emotion is still there, and it shows up in other ways, and that could mean being very intense and very short-tempered in my way of communicating with those around me. That could mean making a decision or acting in a way that is based in fear, instead of looking at the possibility of something working out, but being very defensive and being very making fear-based decisions. And that's not necessarily the most useful way, and I don't think that's the way that Stoicism is supposed to be used, because that's less practical. So throughout this year, since moving to Melbourne, since starting my studies at Australian Centre of Meditation and Mindfulness at ACMM, I've learned different techniques to process my emotions, to verify, to understand, to allow for it to flow through. Techniques like automatic writing, or meditation techniques like the one seat, where in automatic writing we just allow for the energy to flow through, to write down without thinking, without too much self-editing, and just to allow for all the thoughts, all the emotions, all the narratives, whatever that needs to come out. And it doesn't need to be grammatically correct, doesn't even need to make sense, but it is just a space for that energy to flow through, before taking any actions, before making any decisions. In the one seat is a mindfulness practice to allow for those emotions, those sensations, those narratives to appear. and to cultivate a compassionate and gentle space for those emotions, sensations, narratives to appear, not to be pushed and pulled by them, and just to simply observe them gently, and allow for it to be okay to have these emotions, to have these patterns, to have these sensations. And after learning that, or in the practice of that, I realized that this might be the thing that for me that is missing in my practice of Stoic philosophy, because we are taught, or the teachings are to verify emotions, and not to necessarily suppress them. In my previous ways, it is to pause. So I would still meditate or do some sort of mindful breathing, or do something to pause when a strong emotion comes up as best I can, to pause and not to be pushed and pulled by them. But then I would go straight into problem solving mode, which is what is the way to look at this situation, and then I go to what are the resources that I have, what actions can be taken now, and then I try to go straight to tackling the solution, and that is, I guess it's not useful. It wasn't bad. It was a pattern that I did like doing, and I had found useful, and it got me through a lot of challenges. But there is an additional layer or nuance to this emotional verification or emotional processing way. So here I have another quote that might show again why Stoicism can be mistaken for emotional suppression. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any time. This quote is by Marcus Aurelius. So in reading this, pain, or the stress response, or the stress, the emotional response to something, this quote is saying that it's not due to whatever the thing is. So in my recent situation, the pain isn't due to the crisis of having to go back to Jakarta for the emergency. The pain is not due to Leah's needing an operation. The pain isn't due to us having uncertainty in where we're going to live. The pain isn't due to whether or not the business at that time was going to be able to continue, whether or not Habitat Mind Body was going to be able to continue. The pain is not due to those things, but my estimate of it, my point of view of it. So if I was going with my previous protocol or ways, I would go straight to the problem solving mode, which in this case meant for me to change my estimate of it, right? So again, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but changing my estimate of it to shorten the suffering process, or the suffering state, means before I would try and find a useful perspective. So that meant, okay, this is exactly what needs to happen for me to become better, stronger, more savvy, more resourceful, etc. So that would be a useful perspective, or I'll create meaning for it. Like, okay, this is exactly what I need to go through in order to learn and grow, and in order to take the next step, and in order to grow into the type of person that I need to grow into, the type of entrepreneur or business person that I need to grow into, the type of man I need to grow into, etc. All of that is fine. All of that is good, actually. We don't get to choose the pain that come into our lives. We don't get to choose the stress, the way that the stress response feels, but we do get to make meaning out of it. However, if that is done exactly like that, the skipping the step of the verification of emotions, the process of emotions, makes that process of creating the perspective, creating a plan, and then executing the plan, makes all of those steps, and then in action, in the actions to resolve whatever problems, makes all of that still be based in, or still carrying the feelings of fear, anxiety, sadness, or whatever feelings that have come up, because that feeling is still there. That part of the mind is still, that part of the psyche is still hurt, is still scared. The hurt child, or the monkey mind, or the survival brain still thought those things, still felt those emotions. So that didn't go anywhere. By taking just going into action, or going into problem solving mode, might feel better because we're still taking action, and I think it's still better than being pulled by those impulsive thoughts and going into an emotional breakdown state where you're not able to function, and you're not able to function, you're not able to do anything, you're crippled by anxiety. I think it's still better than that in a way, because you're still able to do something. But when I allow myself to feel those emotions, and to feel that pain, and to process that pain in a way that is compassionate and gentle, then there is a stillness and an openness and a spaciousness where we allow those feelings to flow through. And in that spaciousness and that openness, new feelings, new possibilities, new patterns can emerge, because, well, that's the nature of our mind and the way our mind works. It just constantly thinks about different things, and if we resist, or when I resisted, those thoughts and suppressed those emotions, those thoughts had nowhere to go. They weren't processed. So that caused more negative spiraling of thoughts and emotions, and more pain and more suffering. So the thing that I thought I was practicing Stoic philosophy correctly in terms of creating space, not being pushed and pulled by emotions, then going into creating a useful perspective, then going into looking at my resources and making a plan, and then executing on that plan to the best of my ability. I thought that was the correct path, and largely I think it is, but there is a nuance to the verification and processing of the emotions in the beginning. I do want to have a caveat to this, which is it also depends on how much time we think we have. In an emergency situation where you don't have time and you do have to make the decisions quickly and take actions quickly, maybe that's not the best time to sit down to process your emotions and do all of that. That's an emergency. But I think if we practice being able to be aware of our emotions and let it pass through with the low stakes tasks on the day-to-day, when the high stakes tasks come, there will still be that pattern in place, and we can fall to that level of our training. So even in an emergency, we will be able to note quickly that those emotions are there and process them as best we can, as quickly as we can, maybe without the techniques, whether it's automatic writing or sitting down to meditate or anything like that. But it will be a quick mental note that, okay, this emotion is here, but I need to get on with this, and then you can go into the protocol for solving your problem. So I do think that the emotional processing, emotional verification step or technique is crucial in the study and practice of Stoic philosophy. The second misconception or common mistake when I found when practicing Stoicism is over intellectualizing or overthinking about the thoughts, about the quotes, about the meaning of the word. Out of the three today, this is one that I have the least, I guess, trouble with, I think. But maybe some of you guys have experienced this. So, in this case, instead of putting the teachings into practice, there is an over-analyzing of the words in the quote. So, a quote, for example, that could be mistaken for could be used mistakenly, or where a mistake could be made in that shows this over-intellectualizing, is something like this: man is disturbed not by things, but by his views on them, by Epictetus. So in something like this, because man is disturbed not by the things itself, but by his views on them, it might cause us to overanalyze our views on them, overthink. Okay, well, this is my views. Why are my views like this? Why is this the way that I perceive things? Why is this the way that I think about things? Whose fault is this? Is this my upbringing? Is this my parents? Is this my schooling system? Is it society, etc., etc.? So instead of that, if you fall into that and arguing and debating the meaning of the wording of the quotes, it's not very useful, and I think that's where sometimes talking about different philosophy, different quotes can cause issues, because people can argue about the meaning of these words, when it actually should just be taken as something that is applicable, and it's something that, if it's applicable, to apply it, to be pragmatic, if it's practical, to apply it, and to almost just put it into action and see what happens. So I think putting this together with being able to process the emotions. So if I'm able to allow the emotions to go through, and then the teachings are still whatever the teaching is, then to put it into practice is better than if I sit there over analyzing what the teaching is trying to say. Instead of that, instead of figuring out what the teaching is trying to say and overthinking and over analyzing the different meaning of the words, to put the teaching into action and to get the feedback from the situation, from other people, and from myself as well, and to learn along the way. I think for me, this over-analyzing or over-intellectualizing of the different teachings is something that I want to be more aware of, because I don't think it's something that I have a big issue with, but in a group setting, let's say in the practice of our in our group meditation classes at Habitat Mind Body, someone might have this, and they might overthink and over-intellectualize the different teachings, and this is crippled their way of taking action. So I want to be more aware of this, because it could come up in our group sharing, in our group meditation, and I don't know, maybe some of you guys have come across this. Let me know in the comments if you have, and how you dealt with it, or maybe if you're still going through it, how you're going through it at the moment. The third misconception or common mistake is thinking that Stoicism is passive. One of the first Stoic teachings is the dichotomy of control, to separate what is within our control and what is outside of our control, to focus solely on the things that are within our control and to let go of and ignore the things that are outside of our control. And the misconception here is, if we look at things that are outside of our control, we are simply giving up. We are, not looking for solutions anymore, and we're being passive. So a quote here that can cause this misunderstanding is by Epictetus, and the quote goes, "When I see an anxious person, I ask myself, what do they want? For if a person wasn't wanting something outside of their own control, why would they be stricken by anxiety?" So here, Epictetus is saying, when I see an anxious person, ourselves included, the verification process is to ask, what do they want, or what do I want? It is because I want something out of this. I want things to go a certain way. I want this thing. I want this resource. I want something. I have this goal. Because I have wanted this thing, or this person has wanted this thing, and the reality is they do not yet have this thing, and therefore they're thinking into the future and imagining the things that need to happen for them to get this thing, and that causes anxiety. There are, I guess, two things I want to say about this. One is, this assumes that the feeling of anxiety is always bad. So anxiety should never be felt. If you feel anxiety, there's something wrong. You need to do something about it. You don't understand yourself. You don't understand life. You don't understand the teachings of philosophy. But I don't think that's necessarily true. I think if we're able to be present and observe and gently allow for whatever emotions to arise, when an anxious thought arises, we simply observe it. We don't judge it. We don't have any additional narrative about it. We just allow for it to come up. So I just see it and be like, okay, this is what this feels like. These are the sensations that come with it. These are the thoughts. These are the emotions. And that becomes the verification or the processing way. In this particular quote, when he says, I ask myself, what do they want? That is the verification or processing. Now, this is what can be taken as giving up, because if we just go, oh, well, if I don't want the thing, then I won't be anxious. That can be taken as given up. Or or the other thing is, and Leah hates it when I say this, is, oh, we'll see how it goes. Or when people at the gym goes, oh, we'll see how it goes. It's almost like it's I don't know how I'll say this, but it's almost like a little bit of a cop out, because there is this, okay, yeah, I do want this thing, but because I don't want to feel the emotions that come with it, I don't want to process this emotion that comes with it. I'm just gonna see how it goes. It's cool if I get it. If it's cool if I don't. And I don't know if that's. I mean, I think that can be useful, but it can also be not useful. It can be useful if you are stricken by anxiety and you can't function. That can alleviate some of that feeling, right? Letting go. And it can be not useful if you just use it time and again without actually asking or verifying or processing the underlying emotion, and you don't take any action, because, well, you'll see how it goes. Now, I think Stoic philosophy teaching should be something that's practical from the point before, not over intellectualizing or over analyzing. So it should be used in a way that allows you to take action. And I think the nuance of allowing a verification process to where you process the emotions, we allow for it to come, and you look to be compassionate and gentle and understanding for it, and then that allows emotions to be processed, to move on, and then space for new emotions to arise. I think that's the action to be taken when asking, what do they want, or what do I want? When I allow myself to ask, what do I want, and allow the emotions to arise about why I want this thing, or what happens if I don't have this thing, etc. That is the emotional processing or verification process, or the actions to be taken. I think that it's important for us to be aware when the attachment to an outcome becomes a point of suffering or distraction. So if we do have a goal and we constantly think about that goal, it could become a distraction because it takes us away from the present moment. Instead of doing the things that make progress towards that goal, we are thinking about that goals whilst doing doing the actions that get us there. And that could be a distraction. So an example of that might be that I like to use is, let's say you're playing basketball, 3 seconds left on the clock, you have one possession to take the last shot. Instead of just taking the last shot the way that you know how, run the play, get open, set your feet, shoot. Instead of that, you're thinking what it means for you to win or lose, what happens if you miss, all this other stuff. That is when it becomes a distraction. That takes you out of the moment instead of just executing in the present and taking the shot. Another example is if thinking about the overall goal is overwhelming and makes you unable to take action. When we set massive goals, it does put our physiology into a state of, we need to get things going. But when it gets to a point where it takes us out of the present to when we're not able to execute on the immediate task because we're thinking about, but there's also this to do, there's also that to do, that I haven't done this, I haven't done that, this needs to be covered. That then becomes a distraction, and that's when the attachment to an outcome becomes a point of suffering. So in our practice, we do need to become aware and verify when those thoughts come up or when those emotions come up, and practice using our choice to make the decision to let go of that, come back into the present, and execute to the best of our ability in the present. So those are the 3 misconceptions or mistakes that I've gone through. The biggest one being emotional suppression in studying and applying Stoic philosophy. Let me know what have you guys gone through and thought about when in your studies or in your application of Stoic philosophy. What's been useful, what's been not useful, or maybe you had one of the mistakes that I've made here, or maybe you've made other mistakes and have since learned from it. Let us know in the comments. So, some practical takeaways that has helped me and helped those that have practiced with me is the use of journaling. I've mentioned earlier automatic writing to process the emotions. And another technique is the creation of new patterns and new thought and emotional patterns. So what I do is I practice philosophy journaling. So whatever teaching it is for that day, I write the actions to be taken that allows me to practice putting that philosophy into action for that day, for whatever challenges I have in front of me, whether that is making progress for habitat mind-body, training mind-body coaching, or relationship related or finance related, whatever that the challenge might be for that day. I use the Stoic philosophy teaching to be the underlying operating system, point of view, perspective, action plan, to create the plan for that day. And then throughout the day, I execute to the best of my ability using the philosophy, and whatever feedback I get from taking the action at night, I sit back down and I journal about them again. And this kind of like closes that loop and allows me to notice where progress has been made, and makes me able to have access to more dopamine, because now my mind associates the reward with the whole process instead of a specific outcome. When I'm able to do this, I gain access to more dopamine. I'm not expecting whatever from the outcome. I'm merely executing to the best of my ability based on the teachings of philosophy, based on the resources that I have, the knowledge, skills, understanding that I have, and I try to stay as present as possible in my execution, and that allows me to be effective on the day-to-day. I have put this style of journaling, this way of journaling, into Habit app, which can still be downloaded at the App Store. So if you are interested in giving Stoic philosophy journaling a go, download Habit app. Every day there is a new Stoic philosophy teaching. There are notes associated with it that explains some of the teachings, and then there is also practical step-by-step ways of applying the Stoic philosophy teaching as well. And use the opportunity of your day to practice philosophy. Use the opportunity of the day to put the teachings into practice. It is supposed to be a practice. It is supposed to be something that you bring into the situations that fate brings onto your path. It isn't supposed to be debated about and over intellectualized in terms of its wording. It is to be used, and by using it allows for feedback, and that is how we learn and we grow through the challenges that are in front of us. And by going through the challenges, that's how we make progress, and how we turn whatever obstacle into the way. When we overcome the obstacle becomes the way. It is only an obstacle because we don't yet understand how to overcome it. But once we know how to overcome it, it's just something that we do. And Stoic philosophy gives a good base, a good practical base for us to do this with, provided now that we know to allow also for emotions to be processed, for emotions to be verified, because once that's done, it won't be carried into your solution finding or in your execution process. So wrapping up, Stoicism prepared me and prepares us for when things go wrong. Practice it day to day with the low stakes tasks, with things that are simple, that are easy, so that you have you have a pattern that you can fall back to when the stakes are high and when things hit, when shit hits the fan. So it gives us these perspectives, these operating systems, and it is supposed to be used. It's supposed to be practiced. It's not supposed to be an intellectual exercise to argue over the meaning and the context of which when to use them. If you find that it's going to be useful, use it. It's like a tool in your toolbox. It isn't something that's passive, right? Although it teaches us ways to let go of attachment, it isn't passive. It is still about being courageous, looking at things that are dangerous, understanding danger, understanding that fear doesn't have to cripple us. We can still take actions. How can we take action? Maybe that means letting go of certain attachment to the outcome so that we can bring ourselves to the present and execute. It is about being someone who wants to cultivate wisdom, to learn from life, to learn from situations, so that by going through situations, you're then able to really understand in that particular situation what was within your control and what was not. And next time similar situations arise, you can try to do more of the things that are within your control and let go of the things that aren't in a more effective way. So it promotes action. It promotes a way of not being crippled by anxiety, by fear, by whatever situation that fate brings onto your path. And it's about verifying, understanding, and allowing for emotions to come up, because that is a part of life. That is the reality. That is the situation in the moment. And it isn't about suppression. But I think it is through practice that this can truly be felt and understood. So if you are practicing Stoic philosophy and you are finding that you are suppressing your emotions, and that it's still creeping up or becoming the undertone in the way that you engage with the situation or you engage with others around you, try the emotional processing techniques. Instead of going straight to solution finding and planning and all that, take 5-10 minutes out and just write down whatever emotions need to be passed through in an automatic writing or drawing exercise. Try something like a one-seat meditation that can be found on this YouTube channel and on our Spotify as well. There's a simple guided 30-minute one-seat meditation for you to try. And by cultivating this compassionate space that allows for your emotions to appear as they appear, without judgment, without story, without any unnecessary suffering surrounding it, and allowing it for it to pass through, maybe that is what is required for you to be more effective in your solution finding, in your beneficial perspective creating, and your protocol to continue to make progress. Thank you all for making it to the end of this episode. Comment, like, subscribe, turn on notifications for those that are doing this on YouTube. Rate us on Spotify. Please give me a 5-star review. That'll really help this little show that I'm building. And learn and apply Stoic philosophy at Habitat Mind Body. This is going to be something that is going to be present in everything that we do. It is present in the way that we hold our functional fitness training. It is present in the way that we do our mindfulness meditation classes. So if this is something that you are interested in and you are looking for ways to make the best out of your situation, you are looking for ways to gain ultimate freedom in understanding how to use your reasoned choice, how to create the most useful perspectives, how to process emotions, and to bring the best out of you, come join us at Habitat Mind Body. You can sign up to be a founding inhabitant, which will give you 30% off all membership, and you can do this at habitatmindbody.com. That's it. See you on the next episode, where I might talk about how we almost quit being in Australia before we realized this thing. See you on the next episode.